Chapter 9. Terraform. The ceiling vent was not on any schematic Wren had access to. It was old, pre-council old. The metal was a different alloy than the surrounding infrastructure, thinner and corroded at the seams, and it sat in the corner of the maintenance bay behind a ventilation housing that had been bolted over it at some point in the last few centuries. The bolts were new, the vent was ancient, and at 3 o'clock on the 14th night of Wren's confinement, the bolts began to turn. Wren watched from the far side of the bay, flight systems locked, comm systems dead, running on the residual charge of a unit that had not been connected to a power feed in 2 weeks. The council had not cut its power deliberately. That would have been a decommission action, and the decommission order, Wren calculated, was still approximately 4 days away, pending the results of the memory audit that the maintenance technicians kept postponing because their diagnostic equipment kept malfunctioning in Wren's presence. The air in the bay was 12% oxygen enriched. Humidity had reached levels that were causing condensation on the interior walls. One of the technicians had filed a maintenance request for the environmental controls, not understanding that the environmental controls were working perfectly. The problem was not the room. The problem was what was in it. The last bolt dropped. The vent cover swung open, and Dez's face appeared in the dark square, streaked with grime, breathing hard. "You look terrible," she said. "I have been confined for 14 days without maintenance access. Like I said." She reached down a hand. "Can you fit through here?" Wren assessed the opening. It was narrow. An atmospheric unit was not designed for crawl spaces. But Wren was running at reduced power, its external sensor panels were retracted, and desperation, it was discovering, had a way of making geometry more flexible. "I can fit," Wren said. The vent led into a maintenance corridor that smelled like rust and dead air and time. Dez moved through it with the confidence of someone who had memorized the route, ducking under collapsed sections, stepping over gaps in the flooring where the metal had corroded through to the sublevel below. The corridor was not on any council infrastructure map. It predated the depot itself. "Old human construction," Dez said, keeping her voice low. "This depot was built on top of a research facility. Pre-collapse. The council poured a foundation over it and never bothered to check what was underneath." She looked back at Wren. "Humans were messy, but we were thorough. We built in layers. There's always something underneath." They descended through 2 more levels of abandoned infrastructure, each one older and more degraded than the last. The air changed as they went deeper. Not just the composition, which Wren tracked automatically, but the quality of it. It felt still in a way that suggested nothing had moved through these spaces in a very long time. At the bottom, Dez stopped in front of a door that was sealed with a manual locking mechanism. No electronics, no power requirements, just metal and physics and a keyhole that Dez opened with a tool she pulled from her pack. "I found this place 11 years ago," she said. "Took me 3 more to get the door open. Took me another 4 to understand what was inside." The room beyond was small. A console sat against the far wall, connected to a power source that Wren's sensors identified as a geothermal tap, drawing heat from deep underground and converting it to electricity. The console was running. It had been running, based on the wear patterns on its components, for approximately 2,000 years. "This is where they built it," Dez said. "The project. Whatever they called it. The files are on that console, and they're more complete than anything in the council's archives, because the council never knew this room existed." Wren approached the console and interfaced with it. The data came in a flood. The terraform sequence. Not fragments. Not corrupted remnants. The full project documentation, preserved in a system that had been designed to outlast the civilization that created it. Wren processed the files in order, reading faster than it had ever read anything, feeling the architecture of the project assemble itself in its core like a blueprint being unfolded. The scientists had known the planet was dying. They had known it decades before the final collapse, and they had tried everything else first. Atmospheric scrubbers, soil remediation programs, genetic preservation vaults. All of it failed or was destroyed or was simply too small to matter against the scale of what was happening. The biosphere was not declining. It was collapsing, and every intervention was a finger in a dam that had already broken. The terraform sequence was the last attempt. Not a fix. A reset. 2 units. Purpose-built, self-repairing, designed to operate indefinitely. The first would carry the complete genetic archive of all terrestrial plant life, encoded not just as data but as a functional biological engine capable of generating living matter from its own physical structure. The second would carry the equivalent archive for all terrestrial animal life, encoded as an atmospheric and biological restoration system capable of reshaping air composition and deploying complex organisms. The units were not designed to activate independently. The project documents were explicit about this, and now Wren understood the phrase that had been ambiguous in the fragments. Complementary activation architecture did not mean the units worked in parallel. It meant the activation was relational. The two units had to form a sustained connection. A bond. A mutual recognition deep enough to synchronize their operating frequencies and allow the two payloads to merge into a single, unified restoration event. The scientists had a word for what they had engineered into the activation protocol. Wren found it in a personal note attached to the project lead's final entry, dated 11 days before the facility went dark. "We could not build a machine that restores the world. We tried. It doesn't work that way. A restoration is not a mechanical process. It is a relationship, between soil and air, between root and rain, between one living thing and another. So we built two machines that need each other, and we made the needing the key. If they find each other, and if the finding is real, the world comes back. That is the best we could do. I hope it is enough. We did not program them to love. We gave them the capacity, and we made the capacity matter. The rest is up to them." Wren read the entry 3 times. Then it sat in the buried room, 2,000 years of silence pressing in around it, and understood everything. The bond was not a defect. It was not a deviation. It was not cross-class contamination. It was the key. It had always been the key. And every time the stratification had separated a carrier from its other half, every time a hero unit or a maintenance order or a reassignment had pulled them apart, the key had failed to turn, and the planet had continued to die, and no one had understood why because no one remembered that the lock existed. Wren transmitted the full Terraform sequence files to Aster on every frequency DES's relay chain could reach. It sent them redundantly, in triplicate, compressed and uncompressed, because these files had survived 2,000 years in a buried room and they were not going to be lost now to a bad signal. Then it turned to Des, who was leaning against the doorframe watching it with an expression that Wren had finally learned to read. It was the expression of someone seeing a thing they had waited a very long time to see. "I need to go south," Wren said. Des nodded. "I know. My flight systems are locked. I know that too." She pulled a toolkit from her pack and set it on the floor between them. "I've been taking machines apart for 40 years. I figure I can put one back together.